welcome to a new season of the Digital Access Show. Now, for those that haven't listened to us before, we talk everything related to communication, digital communication, and how digital communication can be accessible for everyone. Now, this year we've come up with an idea, and I'll introduce our guest in a minute, but we're going to start the year looking at perceptions, people's perceptions, and the reason why perceptions are important. And it links into the first principle of digital accessibility, which is perceivability, perceptions. Our guest this week is a director of the Digital Assistive Technologies, Digital Access Solutions and Assistive Technologies. I'll get the name right. And he's also the CEO and founder of Peak Performance Development. Alan Parker, thank you for coming on.
Good morning, Narelle, and Happy New Year, Narelle. Happy 1925.
2025.
1925. Let's go back in time. We're talking about perception.
Yeah, well, actually, if it was
Happy
1925, my father would be 100 years old in a week's time, a couple of weeks.
Wow.
If it was 1925.
How about that?
Yeah. Alan, the reason I asked you on is and I learn from you every time I listen to what you say. I want to talk to you about perceptions. I want to talk to you about beliefs and how perceptions, beliefs impact everything we do.
They certainly do.
Mm.
Yeah.
Alan, what is a perception? What is a belief? And where do they interact? Where do they join together?
What great questions. What's a perception? And what's a belief? Great questions. In really simple terms, a perception is a conclusion that I draw from extrapolating and observing and seeing and hearing and feeling and exploring and and how that here in this moment, my ability to take in what's coming to me. Example, you started out and you talked about perception, and then you connected that to accessibility, and then you went into what is a perception. Now that straight away impacts the different parts of my brain and the listener's brains, because you taking it back into what's a perception wasn't the question I was expecting. So all of a sudden, one of the things that becomes really clear about perception, even ahead of the importance of beliefs, are my assumptions. So I'm arriving here with a set of assumptions. And that then interplays with what you give me. And so you and I are both trying to make sense, and particularly our brain in the background is trying to make sense of all this information that's available. And then the brain says, how do I connect this and interrelate it to all the things I've known and experienced in the past? So I've got this complex, I call it a web. Some people call it a perceptual filter. I've got all of this input coming in, and my past experiences and my background and my education and my family history, my religion, my spiritual beliefs, how the day was yesterday, how much alcohol I had, how much sugar I had. All of those things affect the filter that takes everything the world is offering me and it lets some bits in and keeps some bits out. And it's a filtering system. And out of every sentence you give me, my brain will seize on one or two words as the primary points of interest because they're meaningful to me. And that's one of our biggest challenges with perception. And we confuse what I experience from what's happening with what's actually happening.
So the beliefs then is your inner knowledge, stuff you've obtained from what you've learned in the past, what your parents have taught you, what you've learned yourself through different experiences.
Yes.
And the beliefs dictate what you perceive.
I think it's a little strong. I think my beliefs or not, and how tightly I hold them has an impact on what I perceive. Yeah. And how my auditory part of my brain, whether it holds it as definitive language or it holds it as non-definitive language. And there's a distinction between what I know, because what I know to be true, Narelle Gatti is a woman, pretty indisputable piece of information, that's stored in one place. And then Narelle Gatti is a kind and generous woman, which is Alan Parker's interpretation and view of Narelle, is stored in a completely other place. Now, one of them I'm going to make more important than the other. And it could be either. Or it could be Narelle's fascinating. I always discover something new about her. And I'd prefer to go and be really curious with her and not form an opinion yet. So there's 3 ways that I can experience Narelle Gatti, which will change my brain function completely. And it relates back to what we were talking about before we started the recording, of you saying on your holiday how much better you felt and how much clearer your thought processes were when you went walking regularly outside and getting fresh air and activity. And I go, that's you doing something now that completely changes your perception of the world in that moment. And we have, I think we have a lot of conclusions that we draw as being factual or actual that we've prematurely concluded what it is. And therefore, most people are running around in the world trying to validate who they are and how they are, instead of exploring and discovering the person they're becoming and the potential inside them that hasn't yet got out. And if I can relate that back to, in my holidays, I've been doing laps in the pool. Now, as you know, I've been a long distance runner forever. And the heaviest part of my body is my legs. I get into a pool and my legs drag across the bottom of the pool. So I'm a runner, not a swimmer.
Yeah.
So I have this belief that I'm a runner, not a swimmer. And I've been working over the last 2 weeks to see if I could change it. And my swimming's improved because I've been doing it once or twice every day.
Yeah.
And doing 1 extra lap every time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's me just redesigning how my body and my brain processes the world and formulates its perception. And yesterday afternoon, I swam and I thought, I actually felt like a swimmer yesterday afternoon.
Oh.
Now, that throws into doubt the belief I've held for 50 years. You know, I've always gone, I'm a runner, not a swimmer. And that's been the reason I haven't swum.
Okay.
Now, we could call that an excuse. Or I can certainly call it an invisible limiting belief. And I just wonder how many invisible limiting beliefs we hold on ourselves. How's that
You know,
for a description of what a perception is? A perception
you know
is
what?
a mobile dynamic phenomena in how you and I interpret the world in and across and through time. That would be how I'd define it.
And what you've just said is really interesting because you triggered a memory for me.
Right.
And the memory was his truth, her truth, and the truth. In other words, one person sees it one way,
Yep.
another person sees it another way,
Yep.
but there is always the third way, the truth, which when we look at society, that's what dictates the whole of society, isn't it? I love history as well. And when you go and you listen to history from different points of view,
Mhm.
and that's where it really sticks out because when you put that side with that side and you get the commonalities, the parts that are in common,
Yep.
well, they probably did happen, but everything else is perception, how
I
people saw
think
it.
that I would, 20 years ago, I would have absolutely concurred with what you just said.
Yeah.
My post 20 years ago, neuroscience and forensic linguistics
Mhm.
and my nutrition and biochemistry knowledge would now challenge that.
Okay. Why?
Yeah. Um, if I, as a linguist, I think it's worthy of note that true and truth are two slightly different words and interpreted slightly differently. You used his truth and her truth, and they could be very different truths, but they're both true for each individual. Now, here's an interesting bit for you because they're stored in their episodic memory, not their semantic memory, not their visual spatial memory, and not their procedural memory. So it depends where you and I store the information. Now, I throw into the mix the word accuracy.
Yes.
Yeah. How can we identify your truth and the other person's truth and find out where do they intersect so that you have collective truth? Because we have a behavior pattern where you've got a view of the world which is true for you.
Mhm.
And if you've stored it in your episodic memory, which is your experience of what happened,
Mhm.
and we actually unfortunately know it's the least reliable of our memory systems.
Oh,
And it's because it's my experience of what happened, I only remember what I saw, did, said, and felt. And when I say to you, what did Narelle say? If you notice, people can always tell you 10 times what they said. But when you go, what did they reply? Half the time they can't tell you. So, um, episodic memory, the person saying it truly, deeply believes it's true. Yeah, because that's how they experienced it. But there's a lot of omission. Now, this is an area that the insurance industry, for instance,
Mhm.
needs to update their knowledge in their investigation process. The legal system, and in fact, I'm having a meeting within the next week with senior people in the legal profession to talk about how do we manage the legal system's processes of over attending to the perpetrator and under attending to the victim.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now, then there's a whole nother range of things there. But in both the legal and the insurance industry, the people doing the investigating and the evaluating and the determinating need to understand when is somebody speaking from their episodic memory, because I've got to validate that got to acknowledge it, but got to explore it to find out what's missing. And explore it to find out what's exaggerated, overstated, catastrophized, or understated. Because those things happen in episodic memory. But
Alan,
if I can get you to go, what did you actually see? And what did you hear? Not what did you say? If I can get you to go, what did you hear? I'm now in a receiving part of the brain, and you'll give me more accurate information. Yeah.
Alan, how does this all apply then to digital accessibility,
Oh, right.
people with disability, and society? Because I know as a person with a severe vision impairment, people get stunned when they say, oh, I say, oh, yeah, I went and bought a pair of sandals to get by. And they said, oh, you inspire me. And I think, why? Because I bought a pair of sandals.
And that's because you're going to buy them more on the size, the comfort, and what the characteristics are of the quality of the production by feel and verbal instruction, not what you see. So your impediment just simply means that your perceptual filter and processes are very different. The other bit is that if I haven't been through or educated about what it's like to be somebody who's blind, I just don't have any reference points to connect that to. You used the word trigger earlier. I used the word cue. Something happens that cues you to something you already know, and then you can make sense of it. But if somebody hasn't had a visual impairment and they've never had that experience, they don't have the cue. And it's why I remember back years and years ago when I used to do some work with the Blind Society, pardon me, and the hearing impaired. And I would train people who didn't have either of those things by putting blindfolds on them. And we'd run the course for an hour in blindfolds and then unpack. How is it different being blind? Now, people had massive realizations because the parts of their brain that didn't need to work automatically switched on and accommodated. And it's part of why you're and my and Mark and all of us involved in digital accessibility have to make education, exposure, communication such a big focus, because we have to allow other people to walk in the shoes of or see out of the eyes of the other party. And we've become very self-oriented as a society over the last couple of decades. And we don't stop and step into the other person's shoes or glasses. When I did work with, and you'll notice for those people who get to see this on a video, you'll notice I'm always mapping things out with my hands. And that was because I did so much work. Now, I don't sign, but I know that if I'm talking to somebody who's speech impaired, if I position the past always in the same place and the present always in the same place and the future in the same place, they'll actually pick that up in the direction of my voice, in the tone of the voice. That the minute I put the past over there, the voice will take on a particular quality. When I bring it to the present, it'll take on a different quality. And when I take it up to the future, it'll take on a different quality. Now, our language patterns unconsciously change. And that simple thing is something that we just need to get exposed out to the world at a far greater speed than it's happening. If I can just point out how delighted I am every time I turn on a television and see somebody signing. And in fact, I was at a ballet in the last week or two, and there's clearly a story to the ballet. And there were blind, there were visually impaired, there were auditorily impaired people in the room. And the ballet was taking place on stage, and the signer was signing for them. And I thought to myself, wow, that's educating everybody in that room. Because at some point in time, you've got to go, how the hell are they providing some sense of story or music to what's going on physically on the stage? But there were so many of them there, I thought, it's got to be working. Now, the more we're exposing the world to that consciously and unconsciously, the better. Because every person who was at that ballet, I'd never seen a signer at ballet before.
No, I've never.
When that happened, I went, we are making progress, Narelle Gatti. Yeah.
We are, because
Signer
even
at ballet.
audio description happens at ballet now,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
is wonderful. Not,
Yeah.
I'm not into ballet, but I've got friends that are,
Yeah.
and it just excites them that they
Yeah.
can go
Yeah. Yeah.
to the ballet.
It's truly, absolutely fascinating. Yeah.
Alan, what's the takeaway that you can give to everyone that's listening about this? What's one
Oh,
simple
gosh.
thing that society, the community could do to change their perceptions and beliefs?
we used to think we were hardwired, and we now know that's absolutely not correct. That the brain is improving bits of its function or decreasing its function, growing neurons or reducing or pruning neurons every minute, every action, every comment, every word, every meal, every drink is actually enhancing or reducing. The more we can focus on how do we enhance the human experience, how do we make every moment better than the last? Because the brain's capable of reprogramming, rewiring, and providing us a new experience that we haven't had before. Yeah.
So basically saying, be curious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As always, a joy and a pleasure to be with you. And I would love to suggest that somewhere soon we do it again.
Love to, Alan.
Yeah.
So look, Alan, thank you. So
Pleasure.
this is our opening episode of the Digital Access Show. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, share, review, tell your friends, and be curious. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.